Life has a funny way of surprising you, just like that unexpected day when Kenzie, accidentally flung a scoop of vanilla ice cream onto a stranger's pants in the park. You see, I'm somewhat notorious for my clumsy mishaps. It was a sunny day, and I was out enjoying my favorite ice cream when I tripped near a bench where a guy was engrossed in his phone. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed as the ice cream landed right on his thigh. Surprisingly, he looked up, more amused than irritated, and then did something I didn't expect. He laughed. "Looks like I needed more vanilla in my day," he joked. His easygoing reaction lightened my embarrassment. I quickly pulled out some napkins to help clean the mess, apologizing for the unexpected ice cream attack. "It's fine, have a seat," he said, motioning to the spot next to him. "I'm Wilson." Grateful for his kindness, I introduced myself. "I'm Kenzie, and I think I owe you an ice cream." We hit it off immediately. It turned out Wilson worked in IT close to where I did my web design from home. We chatted about everything from tech trends to the latest movies. By the time we parted that day, we had already planned to meet up over the weekend. Fast forward a bit, and things with us were fantastic. However, meeting his mother, Mrs. Brown, introduced a new challenge. Wilson had mentioned she was quite traditional, but I wasn't fully prepared for the encounter. As I entered their family home, there she was, engrossed in an astrology book. "Hello, I'm Kenzie," I greeted her, reaching out to shake her hand. She examined me from head to toe, her expression unreadable, then took my hand weakly. "Wilson tells me you're a web designer and work from home," she remarked, her tone suggesting skepticism more than interest. "Yes, I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it's going quite well," I responded, trying to assert my professionalism despite feeling undermined. She hummed, her attention returning to her astrology book. "And your birthday, dear?" she inquired. After I told her, she scanned her book, tracing the lines before tisking. "Oh, that's an unfortunate date. Very challenging and astrologically incompatible with my Wilson." I maintained my composure. "Well, we're doing just fine so far," I countered, even as she smiled condescendingly. "We'll see, dear. These things tend to reveal their true colors eventually," she said, her words laden with implied doubt about our future. The visit was tense. Each comment from Mrs. Brown felt like a subtle jab at my career, background, and even my taste in clothes. It was clear I wasn't what she had envisioned for Wilson. Despite this, Wilson and I stayed strong. After 3 years of dating and navigating the chilly vibes from his mom, we were unshakable. One lazy Sunday, as we lounged on the couch watching comedy films, Wilson turned to me, his expression more serious than usual, a rare shift from his typical grin. "Kenzie, I've been thinking," he began, and instantly, butterflies erupted in my stomach. "What's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Even though my heart was racing, Wilson dropped a line that felt straight out of a rom-com. "I kind of want to spend the rest of my life watching bad movies with you. What do you say we make it official?" His smile was hopeful yet shy, which was unlike him. I laughed, not just out of relief, but because I deeply wanted this too. "Are you asking me to marry you without a ring, Wilson?" I teased. He replied with a playful grin. "Damn right I am, but I promise I'll get you a ring that'll make up for this not-so-grand proposal." As he pulled me into a hug, I realized just how much I loved him. Planning the wedding, however, turned into quite the spectacle, especially with Mrs. Brown offering her unsolicited advice at every turn. One evening, as we were choosing wedding invitations, there she was, hovering over my shoulder like a hawk, scrutinizing the floral design Wilson and I had chosen. "You're not seriously considering this design, are you?" she frowned. "Mom, it's what we want." "I like it," Wilson quickly defended. "I like it too," I added firmly, determined not to let her steamroll every decision we made. "It's your wedding," she sighed, clearly displeased, but remember, the invitation sets the tone for the entire event. The wedding day arrived quicker than we anticipated, and it was perfect, beautiful, even, despite Mrs. Brown's constant presence. Wilson looked absolutely dashing, and as I walked down the aisle toward him, his wide grin was all I needed. Our ceremony took place outdoors under a majestic old oak tree. The officiant was a close friend of Wilson's, someone who knew us both as a couple and not just as individuals. Do you, Kenzie, take Wilson to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? The same vows were repeated to Wilson, and as we exchanged rings, it felt like a triumph, not just over Mrs. Brown's snide remarks or the wedding stress, but against every challenge that had tried to derail us. You may now kiss the bride, the preacher announced, and Wilson didn't hesitate. As our lips met, cheers erupted around us. It felt like a scene from a movie, only better because it was real and it was ours. After living together for 3 years, buying our place was the next big step. We spent weekends touring homes, weighing features, and balancing desires against our budget. One sunny Saturday, we found a house that almost perfectly met our criteria, charming, with a spacious kitchen and a large backyard. The only issue was the swimming pool. I had shared my fear of water with Wilson, a fear stemming from a childhood incident where I nearly drowned. Since then, even bathtubs made me uneasy. But Wilson, ever the optimist, was enamored with everything else about the house. Kenzie, I know it's got a pool, but hear me out. Everything else is perfect, and we're getting it for a steal, he reassured me as we stood in the backyard. I considered his words, taking in the beauty of the home and the incredible deal it represented. Okay, I finally agreed, deciding that the right home, even with a pool, might be worth facing some old fears, especially with Wilson by my side. I was quite clear about my hesitation to approach the pool, and Wilson knew this well. He wrapped an arm around me reassuringly. Don't worry, we'll sort it out. Maybe we could even fill it in eventually. For now, let's just steer clear of it. Moving into our new house felt like a dream realized. The spacious rooms and friendly neighborhood seemed perfect. However, it wasn't long before Mrs. Brown, who was always keen to voice her opinions, especially regarding financial matters and my career, decided to visit. As she toured our living room, her scrutinizing gaze didn't miss a beat, and her pursed lips were a prelude to the skepticism that soon followed. It's quite a spacious house, isn't it? Must have cost a fortune. Wilson, are you sure you can manage the mortgage payments? Wilson, always the diplomat, attempted to ease the tension. Mom, Kenzie, and I both pitched in for the house. It's not all on me. Feeling the need to defend my contribution, I added, that's right, Mrs. Brown. I also work, you know. My web design job pays well and contributed significantly to our ability to purchase this place. She scoffed, dismissing my profession. Working from home on your computer all day? That sounds more like a hobby than a real job. The rest of her visit blurred into a series of tense smiles and swiftly changed topics. Once she left, I exhaled a long-held breath, and Wilson comforted me. Ignore her, Kenzie. We know our truth. We're in this together, and that's what counts. As weeks passed, our house truly began to feel like home. I established my home office, which became my sanctuary, handling web design projects that not only paid well but also reinforced my capability and contribution to our shared dream. Wilson took care of the yard and the pool, which I avoided. It was another sunny afternoon when Mrs. Brown dropped by under the pretense of delivering some of Wilson's childhood items, but her true intentions soon became apparent. While attempting small talk in the backyard, her gaze drifted to the pool and she questioned, Kenzie, I never see you or Wilson swimming. Don't you use the pool? Caught off guard, I decided to be honest. Actually, I'm scared of water. I had a traumatic experience as a child and almost drowned. I've been uneasy around pools and large bodies of water ever since. Her expression morphed into one of disbelief or disdain. It was hard to tell which. That's quite unusual, isn't it? A grown woman afraid of a little water, she scoffed, and embarrassment flushed my cheeks. I attempted to laugh it off, but the discomfort lingered. Later, I learned that our conversation was more than just awkward. It was the start of a gossip chain. Mrs. Brown, in her so-called wisdom, had shared my fear with her friends and family, embellishing the tale to portray me as mentally unstable. Due to my water phobia, Rumors about my fear circulated back to me through a friend who had heard from another person. Kenzie, is it true what they're saying? That you're too scared to even look at your pools? Feeling hurt and betrayed, I discussed the matter with Wilson, who was equally surprised by the gossip. He did what? That's it, I'm talking with her. This needs to stop, Wilson asserted, confronting his mother about the spreading rumors. The confrontation escalated quickly. He made it clear that her actions were completely unacceptable. However, Mrs. Brown's reaction was even more defensive. She accused me of manipulating her son and trying to isolate him from her. One afternoon, she called me directly, her voice shrill and accusatory. You're just trying to exclude me from the house. What are you hiding, Kenzie? Are you meeting someone else while my son is at work? Her words were deliberately hurtful, and I was taken aback. Mrs. Brown, that's absolutely unfounded. I would never cheat on Wilson. You know that, I responded, but her fury was unrelenting. Oh, I know your type. You think you're clever, but I see through your games, she retorted. After informing Wilson about the call, he was incredulous. She said, what? That's insane, Kenzie. You know that's not true, and I know it's not true, he reassured me, trying to lighten the mood with a laugh. However, I couldn't shake off how deeply his mother's words had affected me. Wilson agreed that it was time to establish firmer boundaries. We decided that his mother's visits would be less frequent, and he would be present whenever she came over to mediate any potential issues. However, life took a strange turn a few weeks after our last confrontation with Mrs. Brown. I began to notice odd occurrences, small things that might seem trivial to others, but to me felt like ominous signs. It started with a sense of being watched. This first happened at the grocery store. A prickling sensation on the back of my neck made me feel as though someone's eyes were intently focused on me. Turning around, I'd catch fleeting glimpses of people looking away. Then at the laundromat, the feeling resurfaced. I was folding clothes when that eerie sensation crept up again. Looking up quickly, I saw a man standing across the street, staring directly at me. I blinked and he vanished. You're being paranoid, Kenzie, I muttered to myself as I hurriedly packed my clothes. The real shock came one evening at home while Wilson was still at work. Engrossed in some web design tasks, I felt that unnerving stare again. Peering out the window, I saw the same man from the laundromat, faintly visible under the dim streetlight, unmistakably watching. Panic set in. I called Wilson, my voice trembling. Wilson, I think someone's been following me. I've seen him a few times now. Wilson's response was soothing yet unsettlingly calm. Kenzie, love, you're probably just tired. You've been working hard. Why don't you take a break? Despite trying to accept Wilson's rational explanations, the disquieting feeling persisted. I took up yoga and meditation, hoping to find some peace, but the anxiety of being watched remained unshakable. Then, one evening as I was leaving the grocery store, it happened again. As he appeared again in the parking lot, I was prepared this time. Quickly, I pulled out my phone and captured a photo before he could disappear. Now, I had tangible evidence, not just uneasy nerves. That evening, when I showed the photo to Wilson, I saw realization dawn on him. Okay, that's definitely not normal, he acknowledged. Later, as we walked home from a nearby restaurant, Wilson's instincts kicked in. He grabbed the arm of a passerby. It was the man from the photo. Why are you following my wife? Wilson demanded, his voice filled with tension, his grip firm. The man, caught off guard, his eyes shifting nervously, finally let out a resigned sigh. Look, I'm a private investigator. I was hired to keep an eye on her, that's all. Wilson's confusion turned to anger. Hired by who? He pressed. Your mother hired me, the investigator admitted, his tone almost apologetic. She wanted proof of infidelity. Furious, Wilson immediately called his mother. Mom, what the hell are you doing hiring someone to follow Kenzie? That's it, you're out of our lives until you can act like a decent human being. The conversation was intense, and by the end of it, Wilson was visibly shaken. He apologized to me profusely as we headed home. The next day, determined to protect our privacy, he bought cameras for every corner of our property. No one's going to invade our privacy again, he promised as he installed them. After the ordeal, Wilson suggested we take a vacation to get away from all the drama. Let's just go somewhere peaceful, Kenzie. Just you and me, he proposed one evening as we sat on our couch, the silence of our home feeling overwhelming. Eager for a respite, I quickly agreed. We settled on a secluded cabin in the mountains. The fresh air and stunning scenery provided the perfect escape. It was just us, no distractions, no prying eyes. Surrounded by the serene beauty of nature, I felt my stress dissolve. We spent our days hiking and our evenings cuddled by the fire. I was able to breathe, laugh, and simply be myself again. Returning home from the mountains, I was radiant, not only from the sun but also from a newfound joy. I was pregnant. We discovered the news a few weeks after our trip, a happiness profound yet mixed with a hint of anxiety. Wanting to protect our little miracle, I chose to work from home to keep the pregnancy private, especially from Mrs. Brown, fearing the stress she could bring. As my 9th month approached, and it became harder to conceal my condition, Wilson and I decided it was time to celebrate openly. We planned a modest baby shower at our home, inviting close family and friends. Despite everything, I felt it was right to invite Mrs. Brown. Taking a deep breath, I dialed her number, my heart pounding. After 4 rings, she answered. "Hello, hi, it's Kenzie," I said, trying to maintain a calm voice. "I wanted to share some news. Wilson and I are expecting a baby. We're having a little gathering next week to celebrate, and we'd love for you to join us." As I invited Mrs. Brown over the phone, there was a brief pause, long enough to stir a flicker of regret. Then, unexpectedly calm, she replied, "I'll be there." The day of the celebration arrived, and our home buzzed with the warmth of family laughter and the cheerful speculation over whether our baby would be a boy or a girl. I mingled among our guests, often resting a hand on my slightly protruding belly, comforted by the gentle nudges of our unborn child. However, the pleasant atmosphere was soon clouded by my greatest concern, Mrs. Brown. Throughout the event, she maintained a distance, but didn't hold back her harsh whispers, hinting to anyone who would listen that I was faking my pregnancy. "Look at her, barely any bump at 9 months. She's made it all up to trap my son and take his money," she spitefully claimed. To my relief, her words didn't find fertile ground. The guests shared knowing looks and eye rolls, familiar with her relentless criticism and dismissing her claims as just another of her exaggerated tales. Yet, Mrs. Brown was undeterred. "I'll prove it to all of you," she muttered angrily as she left the gathering, her face a mix of fury and embarrassment. Compelled by a mix of dismay and a desire to resolve the ongoing drama, I followed her to the courtyard near the pool. "Can we just talk? This isn't true, and you know it," I pleaded, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. Her face twisted with anger, and she snapped back, "Save it. I know what you're up to." As I turned away, hoping to end the fruitless conversation, I felt a sudden, forceful shove from behind. Losing my balance, I stumbled towards the pool's edge. The familiar fear surged as I plunged into the water, the panic of my childhood drowning experiences engulfing me. As the water closed over me, everything turned dark. When I regained consciousness, I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by the sterile beeping of machines. Wilson was beside me, his expression drawn and worried. "How's the babies?" I managed to croak out, my voice laden with fear. He gripped my hand, his eyes moist. "The doctors, they had to perform an emergency delivery. He's in intensive care now," he murmured, his voice shaking. Tears overwhelmed me as the gravity of the situation hit. Our baby boy was fighting for his life. The next day, still reeling from the shock and weak from the ordeal, I urged Wilson, "You need to check the security footage from last night." "Your mom," she pushed me. "It wasn't an accident." Wilson's face registered disbelief. "Kenzie, are you sure? Mom can be tough, but to physically harm you, that just doesn't sound like her." "Just please check the cameras," I insisted, anxiety gnawing at me, fearing he might doubt my words. He reluctantly opened his laptop and accessed the home surveillance system. As the footage unfolded, his skepticism turned to horror. The video clearly showed Mrs. Brown pushing me towards the pool. "Oh God, Kenzie, I'm so sorry. I can't believe she would do this," he stammered, his face turning pale as he realized the truth. Without hesitation, he called the police. The evidence was undeniable, leading to Mrs. Brown's swift arrest. She was charged with assault and endangerment, a stark and painful resolution to a family gathering that had begun with celebration and ended in a grim battle for survival. During the trial, Mrs. Brown's defense claimed that her actions were meant as a joke, an attempt to expose what she believed was my fabricated pregnancy. She argued that she thought my pregnancy belly was a prosthetic and expected it to detach when I hit the water, thus revealing my alleged deceit in front of everyone. However, the video evidence and witness testimonies from the party told a starkly different story. The jury saw through her explanation, dismissing it as an implausible excuse for her dangerous actions. She was found guilty of assault and reckless endangerment. The judge, stern and unyielding, handed down a 3-year prison sentence and ordered her to provide substantial financial compensation for the medical and rehabilitation costs associated with our son's premature birth, a direct result of the stress and trauma caused by the incident. To cover these fines and the compensation, Mrs. Brown was forced to sell her home. As our son navigated his early months, he faced numerous medical treatments and therapy sessions to aid his development, which had been hindered by his early arrival. This period was tremendously challenging for us, filled with frequent hospital visits and constant concerns. Yet, through relentless care and a series of medical interventions, he began to show signs of improvement. Throughout this ordeal, the bond between Wilson and I only grew stronger. Our love for each other and our son deepened in ways I had never imagined possible. As Mrs. Brown's release date drew near, I took a decisive step to protect our family's well-being. I successfully petitioned for a restraining order against her, which prohibited any form of contact with us, especially with our son. It was a difficult but necessary decision to ensure our child's safety and to prevent any further disruptions to our lives. One evening, as we put our son to bed, Wilson shared a tender moment with me, reflecting on our journey. "You know, despite everything, I feel lucky. We have each other, we have him, and we have a future," he said, smiling softly. This conversation marked not just the end of a distressing chapter, but also the beginning of a new one, a story of hope, healing, and happiness for our family.
Isn't $3,500 too little for a wedding gift? My sister-in-law, Mila, muttered sarcastically. Yeah, seriously, acting all high and mighty with just $3,500, my brother-in-law chimed in, smirking as they exchanged glances. No matter how many sarcastic comments I've endured, no matter how outrageous their attitudes, I've always stayed patient because she's my sister-in-law. But today, of all days, I won't forgive them. Approaching them, I spoke up. My name is Naomi. I'm 30 years old. I've been married to my husband Mateo for almost 5 years. We don't have children yet, but we've been discussing if it's time to start thinking about it. After getting married, I moved in with Mateo's parents in their house. My parents-in-law are very kind, and there is no trace of the bullying I've seen in TV dramas. I have a beloved husband and parents-in-law who treat me like their own daughter. I had been living happily with them, but things changed today. One day, my ordinary life suddenly crumbled. I was preparing dinner with my mother-in-law when the doorbell rang. My mother-in-law was in the middle of frying. "Naomi, sorry, I can't leave the stove. Could you get that?" she asked, her hands busy. "Sure, I understand," I replied. As I opened the front door, there stood Mila. "Oh, it's my sister-in-law. Long time no see," I greeted her, surprised by her sudden appearance. Mila rolled her eyes. "What's wrong with coming back to your own house? Actually, I'm more surprised you're still lingering in this house. It's quite shocking from my perspective," she said, her tone mocking. "This woman standing in front of me, laughing at my expense, is my husband's sister. She moved out of the family home 6 months after my husband and I got married. Since we started living together, I've never heard anything positive about her. Dealing with her has been a real struggle for me. It's not just that she's unconventional, it's that she has no boundaries. It's common for her to casually use my belongings or help herself to things others have. She was always problematic, and it seems she gave my parents-in-law a hard time too. She left her parents' house because of money issues and had a big argument with them. And now she calmly returns like this. Passing by me without another word, Mila walked straight into the living room. My mother-in-law's eyes widened in shock at the sight of her. "Mila, why are you here?" she asked in surprise. "Oh, Mom, long time no see. Seems like you're not dead yet," Mila replied, smirking. "Hey, why would you say something like that?" my mother-in-law asked, clearly hurt. "I came with good news, but it's only fair to share it when the whole family is here," Mila replied, waving off her mother's concern. A few hours later, my husband and father-in-law returned home from work. Both of them were surprised to see Mila, but finally, we could get to the main point. In an indescribable atmosphere, Mila spoke with a wide smile. "I came back today because I have some news to share with everyone," she began. "Enough with that, just get to the point," my husband said coldly. Mila clicked her tongue. Whatever. To put it simply, I'm getting married," she declared. "No way. Mila is getting married?" I thought to myself, stunned. With that personality? With that attitude? I shouldn't say this, but if I were a guy, she would definitely not be the type I'd want to marry. As everyone was left speechless, Mila started talking non-stop about her marriage. "I met my boyfriend 3 months ago and he's incredibly handsome. It's fate, you know? The moment I met him, I felt a strong connection. And so, for the wedding, everyone will be there, right?" She looked at us expectantly. All of us, including me, had our mouths wide open. It was too sudden to keep up with. She suddenly left, then suddenly came back, and now she's getting married. Isn't there anything she should apologize to our parents for before this? The conversation continued, and Mila dropped a bombshell at the end. "So, I'll be living in this house until the wedding," she stunned us. "Living in this house? What do you mean?" her mother asked, taken aback. "I've been living in his apartment until now, but since we're getting married, we decided to move to a different place," she explained. "Then why don't you move to the new place?" my mother-in-law pressed. "Well, you see, he's a bit forgetful. He moved out of his current place without finding a new one. So we agreed to stay at our respective parents' homes until the wedding," Mila said nonchalantly. "Even so, couldn't you at least say something before coming back? You always surprise us like this," my mother-in-law continued, frustration creeping into her voice. "Are you saying that too, Mom? What's wrong with coming back to my own home? If anything, you should be happier since your daughter is back, right?" Mila replied, her tone dismissive. "What's with that attitude? I haven't forgotten about the day you left, you know," my mother-in-law said, her voice trembling with anger. "There you go again, bringing up that topic." "Ugh, annoying. I'm going to bed now," Mila said, abruptly ending the conversation as she headed upstairs to her bedroom. After a while, my mother-in-law shouted from behind, "Wait!" but Mila ignored her. My father-in-law tried to calm down my irritated mother-in-law, while my husband and I remained silent in the awkward atmosphere, turning the situation into a complete funeral-like mood. That night, while lying down in the bedroom, I spoke to my husband. "Is your mother all right?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm worried too. I mean, Mila coming back and getting married? It's too sudden," he replied. "Your mother was really angry when Mila left. I wonder if things will be okay from tomorrow onwards," I said, voicing my concern. "Let's just wait and see, Naomi. You might feel uncomfortable being at home all the time, but don't worry too much," my husband reassured me. As expected, the following day marked the beginning of hellish days. Both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law completely ignored each other as if they were invisible. Meanwhile, Mila's wedding preparations continued rapidly, and soon, the day of the wedding arrived. My mother-in-law didn't seem particularly enthusiastic, but she decided to attend as a parent at least. As we arrived at the designated venue, we saw Mila and a man who seemed to be her partner sitting at the reception desk. Huh? Why is Mila at the reception? Usually there would be someone else for the wedding reception, right? I asked, puzzled. Mila caught sight of us and immediately gestured. Oh, you're here. She extended her hand casually. Give me the wedding gift money already. Oh, and you too, big brother and sister-in-law, she demanded, her tone impatient. What's with the sudden demand? My father-in-law asked, irritated. What's the problem? It's my wedding, so give me the wedding gift money. Hurry up, Mila insisted, her voice grating. You're always talking about money. It's really annoying, my husband muttered under his breath. So what if I am? It's my wedding, so give me the money, then you can enter the venue, Mila snapped back. My father-in-law let out a deep sigh and reluctantly handed over the wedding gift money. Then Mila turned to my husband and demanded it from him. Reluctantly, my husband handed over the money, and then Mila unexpectedly extended her hand toward me. What about your gift, sister-in-law? Huh? I said, confused. You should ask if you have a gift from your sister-in-law, Mila declared to me. But I combined it with my husband's gift, I explained. What's that? Your sister-in-law is just a stranger, right? So give me a separate gift from her, Mila insisted, her tone sharp. What is she saying? Even if I'm considered a stranger, I'm married to Mateo, your brother. What's wrong with combining our gifts as a married couple? Keeping my anger boiling inside. I managed to maintain my composure. Listen, Mila. My share is already included in the congratulatory money Mateo gave, I uttered firmly. Huh? You're not making any sense. We canceled the wedding and turned it into a reception only. This is pointless, Mila said dismissively. A reception? Isn't today the wedding day? I asked, bewildered. Having both a wedding and reception costs more money, so we decided to have just a reception. We can still receive congratulatory money like usual, so it's a better deal, right? Mila said, laughing as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. What are you talking about? I never agreed to that. Did you explain this to the guests? I asked, my anger rising. No, I didn't, but it's fine, right? It's not that different, really, Mila said, waving off our concerns. Mila laughed heartily while my husband fumed. But it was too late to change anything, no matter what we said. We reluctantly headed to the designated venue. The atmosphere in the venue was tense as other guests exchanged puzzled glances. Isn't today supposed to be a wedding? One whispered. Another muttered. What are we supposed to do in such a small room? It's too cramped to be a wedding venue, isn't it? Someone else chimed in. I thought they would start with a ceremony, but this place definitely looks like a dining area. The entrance door suddenly opened, and Mila and her husband walked in. Everyone fell silent, dumbfounded by their appearance. I had expected them to be in wedding attire, but they looked exactly the same as when they were at the reception desk. The groom, holding a microphone, addressed everyone. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being here today for us. Originally, we planned to have a ceremony, but it suddenly changed to a reception. Please enjoy the meal, he announced. We looked at the food on the tables. Dishes that could hardly be called luxurious. It was far from what we would expect at a wedding. I overheard a guest whisper, "What is this? A reception?" It was clear now. Mila and her husband had not only cut corners on the wedding ceremony, but also on the reception menu, intending to pocket the congratulatory money in its entirety. Mateo, don't you think this is getting out of hand? The guests are all shocked, I whispered to my husband, trying to keep my voice low. Honestly, I'm disgusted too, he replied, his face reflecting the anger I felt. This is just too much. I'm going to talk to Mila, Mateo added. Should I come with you? I suggested. No, I'll handle it on my own, my husband replied. I watched him walk away, discreetly heading toward the seats, where my sister-in-law and her husband were sitting. To my disbelief, they were openly counting the congratulatory money they had received earlier. What on earth are you doing? Mateo asked, his voice tight with anger. My sister-in-law looked up, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Oh, Mateo, you're adding to the congratulatory money? We're happy to accept it any time," she said with a mocking smile. "Stop joking around," Mateo snapped. "It's incredibly rude to open the congratulatory money in front of the guests. Everyone came here to celebrate your wedding, and you're skimping on the ceremony and reception to get more congratulatory money. Don't you feel ashamed?" he uttered in an admonishing tone. "Well, it's our choice, right? Whether it's the ceremony or the reception," she retorted, her tone defensive. "Everyone made time to come and paid a significant amount as a gift for your celebration," Mateo argued, clearly exasperated. "If you're going to say that, then let me say this too. $3,500 as your congratulatory gift? It's too little, don't you think?" she sneered. Even the groom joined in, laughing. "Too little." My sister-in-law's mocking expression hardened as she continued, "Could you stop pretending to be family for just $3,500 already?" All the anger I had been holding back surged up, pushing me beyond my limits. I stepped forward, looking her straight in the eyes, and asked in a low voice, "Are you serious about this? Your selfish actions have been causing trouble for the whole family. Despite that, we tried to put our feelings aside and be here for the celebration," I concluded. "If you're family, you should have given us more money," she spat back, her voice rising. "All you care about is money, isn't it? Don't you have any sense of gratitude?" I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "Gratitude? For what?" she scoffed. "For the guests who came here to celebrate with you," I shouted. "Don't you feel sorry for them?" Her face twisted. "What, are you here to lecture me? Then go back to your seat." My sister-in-law waved her hand dismissively, as if brushing me off. I took a deep breath and let my voice echo throughout the venue. "Enough is enough. You need to stop this." My strong words caught my sister-in-law off guard, and her mocking expression froze. I continued, my voice unwavering. "You've been causing trouble for our parents, suddenly came back without a word of apology. And now you're complaining about the amount of the wedding gift while pocketing the gifts from everyone. What kind of nerve do you have? Are you out of your mind?" The sister-in-law's behavior changed abruptly. "Oh, wait a minute, I didn't mean it like that," she stammered, trying to backpedal. "What do you know about me?" I yelled, my anger spilling over. "You're right. After all, I'm just a stranger to you, not a family member. So I can easily abandon you. I'll never help someone as unreasonable as you, no matter how much you're in trouble. Be prepared for that," I continued. I snatched the envelope of the wedding gift, which had my husband's and my name on it, from her hands, and pulled out $1,000, stuffing it back into my pocket. What are you doing?" Mila asked dazedly. "I told you, we're not family, so there's no obligation to celebrate. I want you to return the $1,000 that I contributed. It's extremely rude to deceive everyone into thinking it's a wedding, and then have such a modest reception," I snapped. "What's wrong with you?" "It's wrong to take back something you've given to someone," she protested, her voice growing shrill. "And it's terrible to deceive the guests and keep their gifts for yourself. Apologize to everyone who came." I raised my voice even louder, my anger boiling over. My sister-in-law let out a gasp, and tears welled up in her eyes. The guests, who had been listening to our conversation, stood up one after another. Each of them retrieved their gift envelopes and left the venue. Realizing they had been deceived by the bride and groom, everyone lost the desire to celebrate. As the guests walked out, my sister-in-law and the groom cried out in desperation, "Wait a minute, we wanted to use that money to rent a new home. I also have a huge credit card payment this month." As I had expected, even in this situation, they only cared about their own problems, instead of apologizing. I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't even say anything. After that, my spouse and I, along with our in-laws, collected all the celebratory gifts. My sister-in-law and her husband pleaded until the end, but we constantly ignored them. It goes without saying what happened to them afterward. They had to cancel their plans to move to the new house, They were counting on that money. Furthermore, they couldn't even recover the cost of the reception and ended up in debt, having to make payments. Since the groom originally had a credit loan, the two of them were completely overwhelmed by debt. They were disowned by the groom's parents, and with nowhere to go, my sister-in-law and her husband predictably came to rely on our house. "Mom, Dad, I apologize. Please, I'm begging you, let us live here," my sister-in-law pleaded tearfully in front of the entrance. "I'm pleading with you too. Please let us stay here," her husband added, his voice desperate. However, neither my spouse nor my in-laws had any intention of helping them. They were so persistent that we had to call the police to have them forcibly removed. Burdened with debt and cut off ties with many people, they were undoubtedly facing difficulties in life. On the other hand, our lives returned to a peaceful daily routine. We never wanted to be involved in such troublesome matters again. From now on, I'll cherish the ordinary days with my spouse and in-laws. "If you're unable to have a child, then we should consider getting a divorce," Carter stated. I hesitated for a moment before responding. Just as I was about to finalize my decision, I wanted to surprise him with the news. "Fine, I got it," I replied indifferently. "You see, I'm a homemaker in my 30s, living with my husband Carter, who works in an office. Our love story began when I was working at a food-related company. Over time, we spoke many times regarding transactions, and I found myself falling for his occasional smiles, so I decided to take the initiative and propose a relationship. However, when I proposed, Carter rejected me, saying, "I'm sorry, I appreciate your feelings, but I already have a girlfriend." Yet destiny had other plans. A month later, he approached me, admitting, "I broke up with my girlfriend, and I would like to be with you." Apparently, since my confession, he couldn't stop thinking about me, which eventually led to his breakup with his girlfriend. I felt guilty for causing their breakup, but Carter reassured me with a smile, saying, "Don't worry about it. It probably wouldn't have lasted long anyway." His kindness saved our budding relationship. After 3 years of being together, we got married. At that time, Carter expressed his desire to have children after marriage and asked if I could stay at home to support him and our future family. I wasn't particularly attached to my job at a somewhat toxic company, so I decided to quit and become a full-time homemaker. The transition from a working woman to a homemaker turned out to be more challenging than I expected. However, I didn't mind the difficulties. Our new life was sailing smoothly, and I was constantly brimming with happiness. We also had the advantage of Carter's family living just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. Initially, I worried about frequent visits and potential issues with his parents, but my fears were unfounded. They were incredibly kind and helpful, always ready to explain things to me gently and kindly. Despite our childlessness, they never complained, often telling me, "You are even dearer to us than a grandchild, and we only have boys in our family. We always wanted a daughter. Please let us pamper you like our real daughter." I had developed a strong bond with Carter's mother, Hazel, and I trusted his father, Andrew, who might be a man of few words, but he was incredibly reliable. However, this heartwarming relationship lasted only for the first few years. A few years into our marriage, the once kind attitude of Carter's parents began to change drastically. Gradually, Andrew became even more reserved, and Hazel underwent such a transformation that I began to suspect a dual personality within her. Perhaps this harsh version of her was her true self. To quantify her change, if she was once at a plus 100 before, now she seemed to be at minus 100. That's how harshly she treated me. Living nearby, she started visiting our house frequently, especially when Carter was absent, nagging me incessantly and urging me to show her the face of my grandchild. According to her, it was a wife's duty. She would rush me to have a child. Although not long ago she used to say, "Children are a gift from heaven. You don't have to try hard. You'll conceive naturally when the time comes, so don't rush." However, her attitude had taken a complete U-turn. She began to pressure me by mentioning other families, saying things like, "The family over there recently had a baby, and the woman next door is pregnant. What about you?" But no matter how much she pressed me for a grandchild, it was all meaningless if Carter wasn't ready. Despite his initial desire for children at the start of our marriage, a year into it, he had completely lost interest. Even my attempts to initiate intimacy were met with rejection. He would decline, saying, "I'm tired," or dismiss me, saying, "Don't interrupt my gaming." When I tried to explain this to Hazel, she didn't seem to understand and continued pressuring me to have a child, increasing my stress day by day. Unable to endure her relentless attacks any longer, I finally confided in Carter about the pressure I was facing to have a grandchild. He grumbled his response, saying, "I don't think we need to rush this, you know." Despite his reluctance, he agreed to increase our intimate time together as much as possible. Despite our joint efforts as a couple, getting pregnant seemed elusive. Moreover, throughout this time, Hazel kept hurling insults at us, blaming our lack of success on our supposed lack of effort. At times, I suspected that the accumulated stress caused by her constant pressure might be making it even harder to conceive. Unable to withstand her relentless pressure any longer, I reached my breaking point. As a couple, we finally decided to undergo fertility treatments, hoping it would solve our struggles with conception. However, relief was short-lived as a new issue arose, one that centered around Carter. Ever since we embarked on the fertility treatment journey, he began to grow distant, retreating to his room to play video games immediately after returning from work, ignoring my attempts at conversation. Initially, I could tolerate his behavior, but it worsened over time. Carter became increasingly irritable, lashing out over small expenses related to my hobby and unloading his work stress on me. Whenever I tried to defend myself, he would quickly lose his temper, emphasizing his role as the provider and labeling me a freeloader. No matter how many times I reminded him that I had quit my job to fulfill his wishes, he remained unyielding. One day, when he should have been going to work, I discovered he had quit without informing me. When I questioned him about it, he dismissively replied, "It's none of your business." I felt a mix of disgust and helplessness. While I believed we could manage financially for a while through unemployment benefits and dipping into our savings, the fact that he showed no interest in finding a new job stressed me out immensely. With Carter spending his days at home, his main activities revolving around gaming and occasional trips to the convenience store, our face-to-face interactions increased significantly. However, instead of fostering affectionate moments, this newfound time together only intensified our arguments. Our discussions became strained, and gradually, we stopped talking altogether. I found myself questioning the purpose of continuing this married life. The once strong bond between us seemed to be eroding, and the realization slowly settled in that our marriage might be reaching its breaking point. I began contemplating an escape from the dismal situation. One day, when I got tired of Carter lazing around at home, playing games like a child, I confronted him. "You're not a kid. Stop playing games all the time and start looking for a job," I admonished him sternly. His response caught me off guard. "Oh, by the way, my mom told me that if we can't have a baby, we should get a divorce," he said casually. To my surprise, I felt a surge of gratitude towards Hazel, something I never anticipated. After all, I was pregnant. I had discovered this during a recent checkup, planning to tell him that very night. However, now it seemed like the right decision not to disclose the news. With newfound determination, I said, "Okay, I got it." I retrieved the already filled-out divorce papers from a drawer and handed them to him. He seemed taken aback, clearly not expecting me to agree to the divorce, let alone produce ready-to-sign papers. He stuttered and froze on the spot, his usual domineering attitude nowhere to be seen. He appeared dumbfounded, though he seemed on the verge of saying something. The weight of his mother's words weighed heavily on him. Eventually, he reluctantly signed the divorce papers, continuously sneaking glances at me. Later, we gathered to discuss matters like property division. In reality, we didn't have much in terms of assets to worry about. While he had previously complained about my spending habits, it turned out he was the one with the more reckless financial behavior. He not only played games at home, but also spent significant amounts of money at game centers, depleting his finances. We had no savings or assets to split, and Carter realized this with growing dismay. Despite this, he pointed to a passbook with considerable savings and suggested, "Let's divide this as well." "That savings account is not subject to property division," I informed him calmly. "This is the savings I accumulated before our marriage, so it's not part of the settlement," I added. His face paled even more. He then tried to claim rights over the condo we lived in. "I should at least get the condo," he insisted. I smiled, shaking my head. "The condo is in my name, and I've already put it up for sale. You can't live here anymore. It would be a nuisance. Please leave immediately. Besides, I thought this condo would become too small in the future, so I've been saving up for a new home," I concluded. Carter's disbelief was evident as I calmly asserted my independence. Saving money had always been my hobby. Even when I had a regular job before marrying Carter, I managed to save a significant amount, which I used to purchase this condo during a period of rapid advancement in my career. As a result, I owned substantial property. Even with the funds from selling the condo, I could afford to build a decent house downtown. Of course, all these assets were acquired during my single days, making them exempt from the current property division. It appeared my husband was unaware of this, as he seemed to believe he would be entitled to half of my assets. Upon realizing he wouldn't be part of the asset division, he was in a state of shock. We continued discussing, but he couldn't recover from his shock. With little left to discuss, the conversation ended swiftly. I filed for divorce at the city hall, and our divorce was finalized without a hitch. A few months later, I returned to my parents' home, where I received their unwavering support during the birth of my child. I delivered a healthy baby boy, whom I named Rowan, a name borrowed from the Bible. Now I spend my days contentedly with my loving child and parents. Of course, I hadn't informed Carter about our child, fearing Hazel's interference if she found out. Meanwhile, Carter, who was evicted from the condo, retreated to his parents' home but seemed to have become a recluse due to the shock of the easy agreement to the divorce. Occasionally, when he ventured out, his appearance seemed so suspicious that he often attracted the attention of law enforcement, making his situation quite pitiful. Later, I heard that he had quit his job due to interpersonal relationship issues. Apparently, he had a contentious attitude even at the office, especially disliked by female employees, leading to his isolation. Unable to cope, he abruptly quit one day. Perhaps he had always been that way, only showing kindness in front of me, a deceptive facade. 3 years later, I worked as the manager of a craft store, and it became a regular haunt for me. Around that time, the store owner approached me with an unexpected proposition. "I'm getting old and thinking of retiring. If it's all right with you, would you like to take over this store?" Considering my parents' active help with childcare, I had ample free time. The idea of having a job to keep myself occupied seemed appealing. Besides, declining the offer would inconvenience many regular customers, so I accepted without hesitation. As I was serving one of the occasional regular customers that day, I received an unexpected visit from Hazel and Carter. Their thinly veiled flattery about the store irritated me. "Well, what brings you here?" I inquired. Hazel mumbled something incomprehensible, eventually demanding, "Give my grandchild back to me." Evidently, she had learned about my child's birth and was contemplating making the child her heir. "Why did you keep it a secret? We were already in the process of divorcing," Carter accused, clearly agitated. "I kept quiet because I wanted the divorce," I shot back, glaring at them. I knew you both would do anything to prevent it if you found out I was pregnant, I added. Hazel persisted, insisting, "Return my grandchild to me. We spent 3 years together. He belongs with us." Her demand left me utterly flabbergasted. Just then, my parents entered the scene. Sensing the tension, they asked, "What's the matter? Is there a problem?" It appeared that they hurried over after receiving a message from a regular customer. Spotting Rowan holding hands with my parents, Hazel approached him, cooing, "Oh, how cute! He looks just like Carter when he was a child. Look, I'm your grandma." I attempted to intervene, but Rowan, with surprising determination, declared, "I only have one grandma," and hugged my mother. Consequently, my mother politely asked Hazel to leave. However, Carter attempted to forcibly take Rowan away from my parents, shouting, "Just give the kid to my mother." I stood in front of him, trying to protect Rowan, but my physical strength was no match for his. I was easily pushed aside. Carter was inches away from grabbing Rowan's arm when, out of nowhere, my father executed a perfect shoulder throw, sending Carter flying into the air. I looked up in astonishment to see my father, a skilled police officer, who had even competed in national championships during his student days. Carter, completely unaware of my father's abilities, could only stare in pain and shock. My father sternly said, "If you intend to bother my child and grandchild any further, I'm ready to take necessary actions. What do you want to do?" He showed his police badge to Hazel, who turned pale, and they both hurried away. I never found out what happened to Hazel and Carter after that, and frankly, I didn't want to know. Several years later, Rowan began aspiring to become a police officer, inspired by my father's courage and skills. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a police officer too so I can protect Mom," he declared. Under my father's guidance, Rowan diligently worked on his studies, and his martial arts skills became unbeatable among his peers. I plan to continue watching over my wonderfully grown son, grateful for the support and protection my father has provided. Thank you for watching this video until the end. If you found the content relatable, please consider leaving a positive rating and a comment.